Scary telling.
I live alone on a secluded farm with my 5 pigs. They are my only companions, my family. I talk to them as if they were my children, and they seem to understand me. It's a lonely existence, but I've grown used to it. One day, I went to the market to buy some supplies. That's where I met John. He was kind and helpful, and he offered to help me take care of my pigs. I was grateful for his offer, but I couldn't help feeling uneasy about him. John started visiting me regularly, bringing me supplies and helping me around the farm. He seemed to genuinely care about me and my pigs, but there was something off about him. He would sometimes stare at me for too long or make comments that made me uncomfortable. Despite my reservations, I grew to rely on John's help. He would come over every day and spend hours with my pigs. He seemed to enjoy their company almost as much as I did. I started to feel like he was part of our little family. But then one day, I woke up to a horrifying sight. My pigs had been killed, their bodies mutilated with an axe. I was in shock, unable to comprehend what had happened. And then I saw John, standing there with blood on his clothes and a crazed look in his eyes. I tried to run, but John caught me and locked me in a cage. I was trapped, with no way out. John revealed that he had killed my pigs to prove his loyalty and dedication to me. He said that he loved me, and that he would do anything for me. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do or how to escape. John was unhinged, and I was completely at his mercy. I knew that I had made a terrible mistake in trusting him, but it was too late to turn back now. As I sat in the cage, surrounded by the corpses of my beloved pigs, I felt a deep sense of despair. I was alone and helpless, with no one to turn to. All I could do was wait for whatever horror John had in store for me next. I realized then that my obsession with my pigs had blinded me to the dangers of the outside world. I had let myself become isolated and vulnerable, and now I was paying the price for it. I could only hope that I would find a way to escape before it was too late. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My 5 pigs, the only family I had, were dead, and John was standing there covered in their blood. I tried to run, but he caught me and locked me in a cage. As he locked the door, he told me that he killed my pigs because he loved me and wanted to prove his loyalty. He said that he was the father of one of my babies and that he had to protect us from the other fathers. I was terrified and confused. I had no idea what he was talking about. Days turned into weeks, and John became more and more possessive of me. He wouldn't let me out of the cage, and he started to bring me food and water only when he felt like it. He would stare at me for hours on end, watching my every move. I tried to reason with him, to tell him that he was delusional and that he needed help. But he wouldn't listen. He just laughed and told me that he was the only one who truly loved me. One day, he came into the cage with me and forced me to eat roast beef. I knew immediately what it was made of, and I didn't want to eat it. But he made me, and as I ate it, I felt sick to my stomach. He laughed as I ate, telling me that I was tasting what my pigs had been through. He told me that he was doing it for my own good, to toughen me up for what was to come. I felt more alone than ever. I was trapped in the cage, surrounded by the corpses of my pigs, with a man who was becoming more and more unhinged by the day. I knew that I had to find a way out before it was too late. But every time I tried to escape, John would catch me and punish me. He would hit me or starve me, or worse. I was running out of options, and I was starting to lose hope. As the days turned into weeks, I started to feel more and more hopeless. I was alone, trapped, and completely at the mercy of a man who was obsessed with me. I knew that I had to find a way out, but I didn't know how. I prayed for a miracle, but none came. In the end, I realized that the only way out was through. I had to find a way to turn the tables on John to make him think that I had given up. And then, when he least expected it, I would strike. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one I had left. And so I waited, biding my time, until the day when I would finally get my chance to escape. Days turned into weeks, and I remained trapped in the cage with John. He had become increasingly unstable, and his behavior had become more erratic by the day. He would often rant and rave, talking about how much he loved me and how he had to protect me from the world. One day, John brought me a plate of roast beef. As soon as I saw it, I knew what it was made of. It was the meat of my beloved pigs, and I didn't want to eat it. But John forced me to eat it, telling me that it was only fair for me to taste what my pigs had been through. As I ate the roast beef, I felt sick to my stomach. It tasted like death, and I couldn't stop myself from gagging. But John wouldn't let me stop. He made me eat every last bite, telling me that it was good for me. As I ate, I felt my unborn children kicking harder and harder inside me. It was as if they could sense the horror of the situation, and they were trying to warn me of the danger I was in. John continued to torment me, making me confront my deepest fears and regrets. He would tell me stories about his own past and how he had been betrayed by the people he loved. He would ask me about my own past and force me to confront the mistakes I had made. I realized then that John was trying to break me, to make me feel like I deserved what was happening to me. But I refused to give up. I knew that I had to stay strong for the sake of my unborn children and for myself. As the days turned into weeks, I felt my resolve weakening. I was exhausted, both physically and mentally, and I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. But then something inside me snapped, and I knew that I had to fight back. I started to make plans, to think of ways to escape. I knew that it would be risky, but I didn't have a choice. I had to get out of the cage and find a way to safety before it was too late. And so I waited, biding my time, until the day when I would finally make my move. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I had to keep fighting for the sake of myself and my unborn children. Days turned into weeks, and I remained trapped in the cage with John. My pregnancy was progressing, and I could feel my unborn children growing inside me. I felt a sense of hope, knowing that I would soon have something to live for, something to fight for. But then, one day, everything changed. I went into labor, and I knew that my life was about to take a dark turn. John came into the cage with me, and I begged him to let me go to the hospital. But he refused, telling me that he was the only one who could help me. I gave birth to my 5 babies, and I felt a surge of love and protectiveness towards them. They were my family, my reason for living. But then John did the unthinkable. He took my babies away from me, one by one, and killed them. I screamed and cried, begging him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. He claimed that my babies were evil, that they had to be killed to protect me. I was devastated, and I felt like a part of me had died along with my babies. As I held their lifeless bodies, I knew that there was nothing left for me in this world. I was alone, trapped in a cage, with a man who was completely unhinged. I felt like I had lost everything that mattered to me, and I didn't know how to go on. But then something inside me snapped. I knew that I had to fight back, to take control of my own destiny. I waited for John to come into the cage, and then I attacked him with all my strength. It was a brutal fight, but I knew that I had to win if I wanted to survive. In the end, I emerged victorious. John was lying on the ground, bleeding and unconscious. I knew that I had to escape, to find a way to safety before he woke up. I gathered my strength, picked up my baby's lifeless bodies, and ran out of the cage. The world outside the cage was a terrifying place. I was weak and exhausted, with no idea where to go. But I knew that I had to keep moving, to keep fighting, for the sake of my unborn children and for myself. And so I stumbled through the darkness, clutching my babies' bodies, until I finally saw a glimmer of light in the distance. I knew that I had to reach it, to find a way to safety before it was too late. As I ran towards the light, I felt a sense of hope. I knew that I had survived the worst that life could throw at me, and that I was capable of anything. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I was ready to face it, no matter what. I ran towards the light, clutching the lifeless bodies of my babies in my arms. My body was weak and exhausted, but my mind was filled with a newfound sense of determination. I had survived the worst that life could throw at me, and I knew that I was capable of anything. As I got closer to the light, I realized that it was a farmhouse. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if it was safe to approach. But then I heard a voice calling out to me, and I knew that I had to take the chance. I stumbled towards the farmhouse, and a woman appeared at the door. She took one look at me, with my bloody clothes and lifeless babies in my arms, and immediately called for help. Soon, I was in an ambulance, on my way to the hospital. At the hospital, I was treated for my injuries and given a safe place to stay. The doctors and nurses were kind to me, and they did everything they could to help me recover. But I knew that the scars of my ordeal would never truly heal. In the days and weeks that followed, I tried to come to terms with what had happened to me. I spoke to counselors and therapists, trying to make sense of the trauma that I had endured. But it wasn't easy. The memories of my time in the cage haunted me, and I found myself reliving the horror over and over again. But I refused to give up. I knew that I had to keep fighting, to find a way to move on with my life. And so I started to focus on my babies, on the love that I had for them and the hope that they represented. I knew that they were gone, but their memory would live on, in me and in the world. And then, one day, I received a surprise visit from the woman who had helped me at the farmhouse. She told me that she had something to show me, and she led me outside to a small garden. There, in the middle of the garden, was a beautiful statue. It was a statue of a mother pig, with 5 baby pigs snuggled up against her. And on the base of the statue, there was a plaque with the names of my babies engraved on it. I felt tears streaming down my face as I looked at the statue. It was a beautiful tribute to the love that I had for my babies and the hope that they had represented. And it was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was still beauty and love to be found in the world. As I looked up at the sky, I felt a sense of peace. I knew that my babies were gone, but their memory would live on, in me and in the world. And I knew that I was strong enough to face whatever challenges the future held, with love and hope in my heart.